that we can be able, in conjunction with the 21 harried areas governors, to see how we can organize the livestock sector so that they have pasture, water for their cows. But I know, and this answer will have to come from them because they are pastoralists, how we'll be able to keep the animals together, because even when these pastoralists or animals are moving from one place to another, there is a lot of loss of weight and minerals, and that's why you realize their livestock are not able to feed or to fetch so much money. So I'll be engaging you. I'm not a pastoralist. I'm willing to listen, come up with ideas, and everybody else, because that's my duty, to address the problems that Kenyans have through consultation and advice. So I'm open-minded. My policy is open. Mr. Speaker, the question Rahim asked whether I will implement my manifesto. My manifesto ended when I lost the position of governor in Meru. But I want to tell you that manifesto borrowed seriously from the Kenya KWAA manifesto, because we are in those consultative meetings, and I wanted to align my thoughts and ideas along the Kenya KWAA plan to address the problems of our people in Meru, because I would not have done it alone without consultation, without working closely with the national government. So whatever we talked about and whatever is in the Kenya KWAA government manifesto is what going to plan. That's the campaign I'm going to lead to espouse on government policy and agenda for us to be able to serve this country, and in a manner that is all inclusive. Mr. KWAA, you talked about drought ravaging the country. It is true that there is drought, but allow me to say that we have and people are almost losing lives because of lack of food. We'll have immediate, medium-term, and long-term plans on how to can deal with this situation. And one of the things that I think the government has already started doing is the provision of relief food to those people that are quite vulnerable. It may not, I would not want it to be a thing that we must really be happy about. Let it be, food relief must be a last resort. And irrigation, just like the President said yesterday, is something we'll have to ensure that any irrigatable land that is available for farming, then we put it into agriculture. I want to persuade the government or the cabinet to also be able to come to agree, because we have so many pieces of land that are idle, owned by government. You realize it's a shame when you find the prison service is buying food, or money is allocated to buy food, yet there are a lot of labor force and the very big tracts of land lying idle without any agricultural activity. So I'll be pleading for government to find it, or to give a directive or a policy on how we can utilize government land institutions that have big land for use for agriculture. Our universities, those research institutions, how we can apply those pieces of land for agriculture, and even for training, knowledge transfer to our young people who want to do agriculture. Then of course, agroforestry will be very important. Then how and to engage everyone else to deal with the effects of climate change. I will have to talk with my counterpart in the Ministry of Education, so that we also revive again the 4K clubs in our schools. I don't know how they ended dying, because as our children grow up, then they're able to know, to adopt an idea that we must start sending ourselves from the school and be able to appreciate how important agriculture is. Mr. Amisi, you asked about the flow. That was completely deliberate, because the documents that I've given out here, because people that are alleging, I don't want to give them an opportunity to prove give them opportunity to prove their case. It is their business to prove what they are saying. So by so doing and understanding the powers of this committee and the correctness of the information that you give them, because it's also binding, I didn't want to assist them prove their own case. And just like I think both said, if there is anything that is not correct, it's a matter of time. But I want to say that whatever I am giving out here is true to the best of my knowledge.
Honorable members, we have so far done, just hold your cards. We've done 2 hours and 5 minutes with this nominee.
My question.
Can we agree to an addition of 15 minutes, then we close? So I'll give all the remaining honorable members 1 question each. Naisula 1, go to Gikaria 1, Mole 1, Raso 1, Shuria 1, Mary 1, Mokami 1, in that order.
Honorable Speaker, my question was not answered.
Honorable Linturi,
yes.
Mama Mishi asked this question.
Russell.
You have talked about sugar.
Russell.
What about other crops like bixa, like coconut, like cashew nuts? What are you going to do about them? Note that and start with it after taking the other questions.
I answered.
Yeah, like that.
Naisula, 1 question each, please.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Honorable Linturi, you know, governments are there to serve the needs of Kenyans and actually prioritize. And these needs are not static. They change, you know. Now we have drought, then we are hopeful that we'll get the rains, and so it's not static. And right now, the biggest problems Kenyans are having, apart from the economy, is just having food on their table. And so when they ask for unga to be 70 shillings, people just want food. And that is the problem right now. But from what we have heard recently is that the government has subsidized fertilizer, which is very good. You're saying you're going to subsidize for production. But for consumption, we want food now. We know as we wait for the crops to grow, for the fertilizer to get to the farmers, what measures will you put in place to see, now that you have removed the subsidy on the maize or on the flour, but what will people eat as we wait for the crops to grow?
Gikaria? Then
Thank you.
Then Raso.
Linturi, I know you are friends, and my question, just like Mishi has indicated, as you address other crops, can you please also address about pyrethrum, potatoes, and milk? Because these are key things within our region, and particularly the milk has really dropped. And lastly, though I'm not a fan of Wajakoya, but he came up with an idea that this country, about this Bangi issue, I'm not his supporter, but is it something that can be considered for purposes of medicinal value and getting foreign exchange, not for consumption? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Honorable Mithika, you still owe me my signature of that day and you disappeared. My question is, agriculture is devolved to the county government. And when I and you were growing up, we used to have agricultural extension officers who were a very good link between the farmer and the government. I've heard you say that you want to have a database of all the farmers in Kenya. How you'll do that, you have not given us the details. And I want to hear your comment on genetically modified crops, that is the GMO, in the basis of whereby we know most of the GMO seeds, they don't regenerate. You cannot harvest a GMO seed and go and replant again. And the effect they have to the society and especially to the farmers, how are you going to sustain farmers with with a program of seeds, because I can foresee your government under the government of today is agitating very much about GMO, whereby we lose the indigenous seeds we have in this country, the original maize, the original beans, the original ndengu, and the rest. What are your thoughts on that? And if you can detail your plan, and especially on the agricultural extension officers vis-a-vis is a devolved government function.
Raso. Thank you very much, Speaker. Honorable Linturi, agriculture to GDP contributes 24% and employs 60% of the Kenyan workforce. So when you say that agriculture is devolved, it is devolved, then I see you are likely to run away from the main issues that affect the Kenyan. But that is not a debate. I don't want an answer. But my main question is 90% of meat consumed in Kenya comes from the arid and semi-arid land where the pastoralists live. You have not talked about the livestock. And I foresee if this committee is going to approve your nomination, you are likely to talk about miraa, tea, coffee, pyrethrum, and other crops that is grown in less than 10% of the Kenyan land mass. Tell us, what do you have in mind in terms of bringing livestock to be one of the main GDP contributors for Kenya? Thank you, Chair.
Shuria.
Thank you, Chair, and I echo my colleague here. I hope you'll come up with a good plan for the livestock marketing and livestock production. And my question is, what is your take about the Galana Kulalu project? Thank you.
Emase, Mheshimiwa.
Chair, with your permission, I have 3 concerns, and I'll be very brief. The first one is a question that I've been requested to ask. The warehousing receipt system. Chair, I'll be very brief and very fast.
If you convey an outsider's question, you surrender your own.
Okay, it's related to what I wanted to ask, so I'll just combine. The warehousing receipt system has been put in the Ministry of Trade under Executive Order number 1 of 2022 by the President. Whereas the Act and the regulations was done by the Ministry of Agriculture, and it was meant specifically for crops and livestock. So how does that misplacement sit with you? And because it's related to what I wanted to ask on, Mr. Speaker, currently the government is using National Serious Produce Board warehouses to store the fertilizer, the subsidized fertilizer. So my concern, because we represent farmers from the rural areas who need to access this fertilizer, what plans do you have in terms of distribution, ease access, and short distances? Because you'll find this depot is in one center within a county that is so wide, and it has got several sub-counties, because that is contributing to corruption that is still being experienced because of the long distance and what have you. And as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, the issue of segregation, because now GMO is going to be commercialized in the country. Kenyans are concerned. What are you going to do to ensure there's that distinction in terms of, if I'm going to the supermarket and I want to buy a non-GMO product, are you going to have plans to ensure that there's that segregation, while at the same time ensuring there is safety, and how you're going to counter the risk? I think I'll leave it there. The other one, my colleague asked. Thank you.
Mheshimiwa Mukami.
Congratulations to our nominee.
Thank you.
Honorable Linturi, I want to ask you one question regarding the grantee minimum return. Considering it's not very popular in a free market, I would like to hear how you are going to do about that.
You can quickly answer those questions, starting with what was left of Mishi Mbogo, and then Naisula down coming.
Mr. Speaker, if it may have escaped Mishi, when I was discussing about the livestock on how we will be able to bring them together to earn the value. I also mentioned that I will be working very closely in consultation with the governors, because every area has its own unique crops which they would want to prioritize, and we will not achieve adding value to them without us working together. So if it's for coconut and other nuts that can produce edible oils, because there are many that are there. So I'll be open so that we understand how it can be done. What costing? In any case, I think there is commitment from government to earn the value, so that we can, within the value agricultural value chain, we can be able to get more. So because there is that goodwill, it's not something that we'll be starting. It's something that I will be following up with all the stakeholders so that we work together. And Aishula asked how on what our immediate plan to provide food. I think I said earlier from the beginning that if people are dying today and they want food, the fastest way to ensure that they have food is relief food. You can give them the relief food because that is what they require for now, as we organize ourselves to address the issue of lack of food in the medium term and the long term.
Chair, mine was on the price of unga, because the relief one had been answered.
The price of unga, Mr. Speaker, I don't think will also come down immediately, because unless government is willing and ready to continue with the subsidy to bring down the cost of unga. This is a matter that will be discussed, and once discussions are on, we will be alive to the fact that we really have to do something so that our people can be able to eat. And let me also take this opportunity to answer the question that was also raised by Mule, because that revolves around provision of food when brought about the issue of GMO. If you look at what informed the lift of ban of GMO, is that problem of lack of food. And we'll have to make choices, Mr. Speaker, and ask ourselves whether we need to let our people die or adopt GMO. I have not seen anywhere there has been any scientifically published in any journal where GMO has been sent to really be harmful to human beings. Mr. Speaker, I want to
Point of clarification, Mr. Speaker, to the nominee, and they need to probably do more research. There is a great scientist in France who has done extensive research on GMO, reports done, and why the government of the day of the late Honorable Mwai Kibaki banned GMO was based on scientific proof of how dangerous the GMOs can be. And the worst part of it is, Honorable Nominee, the seeds cannot regenerate. You cannot replant a GMO seed, and that's scientific.
I wish you gave me time to continue answering this question, because the research on document that's popularly referred to was later pulled down, or was the scientists sent, and this is the information that I have, because even in this country, our biosafety and the biotechnology experts that we have, and people must really be able to understand exactly what GMO is all about. GMO, from my layman's understanding, is the transfer of genetic material, and the truth being that, and if our main problem is food, and I'm sure our government cannot be that careless to allow food that is harmful to our people. I want to be asking, Mr. Speaker, the experts, those that support, those that do not support the use of this GMO food, to really to have a discussion on us to agree on how we move forward. But as far as I am concerned, we must choose between what is a lesser evil. We travel quite often. You don't go to America. You can go to wherever. What we eat is GMO. Yeah, so we wait for our people to die, or we give them GMO food. And for your information, Mr. Mule, you are a product of GMO. Yeah, when you look at the history of evolution of man, from Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, and now where we are today, it's genetic transfer that has taken place between human beings to where we are today. So when you graft trees or mango, or lime and the orange, you fuse them together, produce something else different. That is genetic transfer. So let us not...
Point of order, Chair. I doubt whether I'm a product of GMO. I'm a product of my parents.
Sorry. Chair, I think, Chair, the direction we are taking is not being beneficial to the country, because the issues the Honorable Mule is raising on GMO are really not factual. And it is indeed true that the scientist is referring to the French scientist, because I was in the Agriculture Committee in the 11th Parliament, Honorable Speaker, and that scientific information has since been repudiated by other scientists. And therefore, when we are on national TV and we want to make the country believe that GMO is harmful, that there is this science, that the Honorable Mule is not availing to this committee and the country, I think we are not being beneficial. True, Honorable Speaker, if I can finish.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
If I can finish, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is also...
Mr. Speaker.
He is not finished. Okay. Mule, hold your horses.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for that protection, because I was saying we should not use this process, Honorable Speaker, of vetting to try and play to the gallery in terms of demonizing what is otherwise government policy. The Honorable Linturi is not yet Minister for Agriculture, and as members of Parliament we will have the opportunity to interrogate through the relevant committees the issue of GMO. And there is no government policy today that is saying there is no Kenyan farmer or any Kenyan who will be forced by government to either consume or plant GMO food. It is a choice you make. And it is indeed true in America. When you travel to America, you walk into a shop, you have the choice of either buying what is organic or GMO. And I want to believe that will be the policy of government.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, Jeanette.
Chairman, I wanted also to bring to your attention that first I want to tell my leader, the majority leader, that he is the majority leader. He is not going to become the Minister for Agriculture for the next 5 years. The man who has a chance of becoming is the nominee ahead of us, if he is approved. I think he's competent enough to answer those questions. Secondly, Chair, the issue of GMO is a government policy. It was approved at the last cabinet meeting of the government. So it is important to interrogate the nominee very well on a government policy that he's going to implement, because he's the implementing authority as the Minister of Agriculture. So, Chair, it's in our place as a committee to know from him, as the man who's going to sell the seeds of the GMO to Kenyans, whether those seeds are safe, what scientists are saying, and what is his thought to make sure that the people who want to eat organic food, and the people who want to eat the GMO, eat GMO food.
Mine was just a point of information, Madam Chair, that the theory of evolution of man, as propagated by Charles Darwin, had nothing to do with the genetic engineering.
We don't even need to go there. He had no scientific basis for saying that, so we don't need to go into that. Yes. But
Chair,
continue responding to the questions as raised. You had reached Russell.
Mr. Speaker, let me also hand up that...
And avoid Honorable Linturi making unsubstantiated scientific statements.
Yeah, let me also hand up, and...
Because for sure, Mule is not a product of GMO.
I don't want to take that trajectory, Mr. Speaker, but let me end and say that the Ministry of Agriculture and Government, there are certain institutions that have different mandates. Kenya Seed Company, Mr. Speaker, has the mandate to scale up or multiply seeds that are used by our farmers, and there will be that opportunity. There is opportunity for government to grow enough or to germinate enough seed for use by enough seed for use by our farmers. Mr. Speaker, if our immediate problem is really food, and of course government will be guided by best practices from other jurisdictions that manage or that consume or use GMO, won't be guided by one of the organization guidelines. Mr. Speaker, will also be, I think, be able to take decisions and say, for example, if this is GMO, we can label the maize that you buy or the food that you buy from our supermarket, so that when you go to your own supermarkets, you are able to identify whether you want GMO or not, or choose to die of hunger and not taking GMO. So because that is a really big problem that we must really address, and address it candidly. I was asked about I think is Raso about livestock. Livestock, Mr. Speaker, is an area that has really require serious support as far as I am concerned. And I mentioned Raso that will be consulting with the farmers and the county governors, especially from the 21 semi-arid areas, on how we can be able to ensure maximum productivity and reap most for our farmers through livestock. We'll be proposing, since counties have owning areas, they used to be called owning areas for livestock, whether they can see how we can be able to establish food laws so that those animals that really, for us to gain more, can be fed from there and the weight, and then you have maximum that you can gain, because you have an institution like KMC that will be able to take up your livestock for commercial. We also have probably proposed off-take programs so that when there is drought a time like now, and ask government to also to keep a reserve, just like we are providing for food, strategic food reserves. We can also be able to persuade the government to provide for Akite that will be able to buy livestock during those drought, those very handy times, for purposes of making sure our farmers do not lose their livestock. There is also a livestock insurance program, which we can also really bring in, so that in the event of loss of our animals, then the farmers really do not lose. But all this will happen, Mr. Speaker, if I have that opportunity to discuss with the people that are technical in the ministry, that will advise me, and then we'll be able to appear before you as members and the leaders of this country, because you are the people that are exercising raw power from the public in terms and agreeing on how we want really to our country to move forward. Mr. Speaker, I was asked something to do with the Ngalana Kulalo project, and from, I think, where I sit, the whole idea was from this was to provide proper infrastructure for investors to come in and do agriculture. But Mr. Speaker, this project, in my view, is good, something we really need to see how to revive it, because the whole project was condemned because from the first season, because the production that came out of the 10,000 acres was not able to meet the cost of investment, and people thought that was a scandal. There is no way you can have such huge investment and expect to reap benefits in the first season. So, Mr. Speaker, to address the future problems of our country, we must face this dragon head-on, and I think we will not shy away from dealing or improving infrastructure on Galala Kulalu so that we can have investors to farm. Mr. Speaker, I think Mase talked about misplacement of roads in the Ministry of Trade and the Ministry of Agriculture, and on I didn't get properly, but was it Kenya land?
It is about this, the warehousing receipt
Yes,
system.
correct.
There is an order that has taken that to the Minister of Trade, yet it was established by the Minister of Agriculture for crops and livestock products. So that misplacement, how are you going to deal with it?
Mr. Speaker, you know, when I have made sure that our farmers have produced enough food, and in consultation, working together with all the other stakeholders, the other part in terms of how that food gets to its market, I think is an aspect of trade. Where there will be need for us to consult with my brother Moses Kuria in addressing this problem, I will be willing and ready to engage. Where the farmers probably will feel that one or two things are not clear, are not right, we won't be open to discussions. And more often, that's what we find. Even when you legislate and pass law, there are those rooms where when you find there is some bit of lacuna, the intentions of the law was not properly, is not being achieved, then we'll always be coming back for amendments. So when it is tried, and for example, if it doesn't work, then you know the president has power to transfer functions from one ministry to another. So I remain hopeful that in whatever department or ministry and government institution or mandate is given, then being bound by the collective rule of government, then we'll be able to sort the problems of our Kenyan people together. Okami saying the GMR is not popular. Mr. Speaker, you know, we can also, when things are done differently and the forces of demand and supply are left to fix prices in a normal market, then that would be the most ideal situation. Mugami, I think we can still achieve this if, for example, we were to ensure as government we are able to bring down the cost of inputs to a great level. If we can be able to maximize productivity on our small pieces of land, we can be able still to have the forces of demand and supply fix the prices of our produce. And I also want to tell the Kenyan people that are listening, the supply of fertilizer is not a quick fix problem of what we're having. We are trying to support farmers to apply that fertilizer to the soils that need fertilizer. And that's something that we've not really discussed seriously about, because whenever government gives us subsidies on fertilizer, everybody goes running to pick fertilizer, even for soils that do not need fertilizer. So as a ministry, I want to ensure that we provide necessary information, we'll be able to test our soils and advise our farmers, and probably come up with a new platform where farmers will be able to know what fertilizer to use in what particular soil with certain pH. That way we will be able to achieve more productivity. And there are farms that have lined the fallow for a long time, may require not fertilizer, and when that education is properly given to farmers, then we'll be able to succeed. It will also be necessary and important for people, our farmers, to know, and for the ministry and other county governments to know, fertilizer must be given at the right time, so that you do not give fertilizer once farmers have planted, or give CAN for top dressing when the rains are gone. So the timely giving of inputs or seeds, which must also be matched by a way we are able to forecast and be able to monitor weather patterns, will be able to help us increase productivity, and in that way, Mr. Speaker, I think we'll be able to get the food on our table.
Thank you, Honorable Linturi. And now,
Chair, there is a clarification. There is a question regarding
members, look at the clock.
It's okay, Chair. We just need to do this for the purpose of this vetting. I asked Honorable Linturi regarding agricultural extension officers vis-a-vis the devolved function of agriculture in the county government. And I believe you need to give us the clear policy the ministry will come up with, whether we are going to have agricultural officers commission.
Including my Parethram thing.
And Chair,
The Parethram.
Chair, you can answer them together. I asked about taking farm inputs, specifically the fertilizer, closer to the farmer in the rural village. What policy is government going to put in place to ensure there is a depot in every sub-county, Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
Chair, can I add on something?
Wow.
Honorable Linturi, I think we should also encourage our farmers to start using manure, what we used to do when we were young. Instead of using fertilizer, we do organic.
Chair, clarification also on the one issue. Chair, it will be very absurd if the nominee lives here without saying anything about fish also. Say something about fish. Please, fish.
That question, but he never answered.
Mr. Speaker,
You have 2 minutes to attend to all those issues.
Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with Mheshimiwa.
And you've got it.
Yes, agricultural extension officers.
Taking subsidized fertilizer and seeds closer to the farmers.
Yes.
And then Parethram.
Pyrethrum and fish.
Mr. Speaker.
And the use of manure as opposed to petrochemical-based fertilizers.
Number one, that's a very good proposal from Mukami, and farmers must listen. If you keep more livestock, whether it's poultry, cows, goats, that will be the best excellent manure to use for our crops, because they are safe, better than even the fertilizer we are talking about. Number two, agricultural extension officers, that's where we need to go. People require education. We need to educate our farmers on what we need to do. Mr. Speaker, when I was running as governor, in fact, there is no single meeting I didn't go talking about why it is important to employ extension officers. Even when I sit with the governors, I want to persuade them to have agricultural extension officers, because these extension officers can be given performance matrices on how much food should be produced in a certain particular piece of land on by how many farmers to increase productivity so that we are food secure. So I agree, I support it 100%, and I am sure this can be done. It is achievable and will not succeed easily. We do not tap. I also want to tell you that I think somewhere, and why we are feeling this problem, is that the Ministry of Agriculture stopped employing these agricultural extension officers some time ago. I think like almost 10 years ago, they've not been employing. And even you look at the staff at the ministry, they are quite old. So we will be coming to you so that at least you can also allocate some budget for us to be able to start recruiting members to that, so that, extension officers, to be able to beef up our education and training capacities to the farmers. Mr. Speaker, Emase talked about what we intend to do to ensure that fertilizer and seeds are taken closer to the people. Let me also commit that Kenya Seed Company, NDC, whose farms are used for multiplication of seeds, we are going to discuss so that they can be able to produce more and whatever support is required. Fertilizer and getting closer to the people, Mr. Speaker, we'll have either to get into, we have national cereals and produce boards, but they are not all over. This is one of the areas where we can be able to keep our fertilizer. But I think it's not because of the system that we want to use to avoid abuse and the cartels. Probably we all have to sit in and discuss with the agrovets on how we can be able to manage those stocks so that they can also be our owning area, our owning stores for the farmers that we want is to support this kind of a program. But if we are to continue putting up more national cereals and produce bonds for purposes of getting very close to the location or to either the sub-location level requires huge resources. So we'll have to see how to balance our priorities, because it is important that is done, or how we can with the county governments to ensure once fertilizer or seeds are delivered to the nearest depot of National Cereals and Produce Board, then they're able to support in the transfer or in the delivery chain, so that farmers can be able to get their fertilizer at the nearest points possible. Any other question?
Pyrethrum and fish.
Mr. Speaker, I think fish is another serious economic activity in this country. And Juliet, I won't tell you, Mauri is producing more fish than Kisumu or your area now. We are in it. We are doing a lot of fish, and fish is transforming people. I will be talking fish farming. I will be talking to my counterpart, Muvuria, who is now in charge of the blue economy docket, where that one is, and see how to support farmers. One is the production of fingerlings, so that as we encourage our farmers to keep fish funds, then we also have the right species that can be able to do best in trying to support our food chain, because fish is food just like any other. And the other pyrethrum, you spoke about pyrethrum, but Gekaria spoke about pyrethrum. I think there are areas in this country where pyrethrum grows, and pyrethrum, I think, is raw material of pesticides that we require for, we buy a lot of pesticide to preserve our seeds and our food. And I think time has come when we really have to sit down and see how to empower farmers, take back them to the farmers to do pyrethrum, because is a plant, is a crop that is so beneficial to our economy. I am inviting you, Mheshimiwa Gekaria, to share more thoughts and ideas on how this can be done, because just like I said before, that we are going to map out the country to have crops and data on where we have crops growing best in whatever county, so that in terms of disseminating information, then it's part of the thing that we need to be telling our farmers, so that they don't do a try and error thing. And I'm sure this is available. It is possible.
Thank you, Honorable Linturi. I'll give you 3 minutes to make your closing wish.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank this committee for giving me an hearing, and I
have given you 2.5 hours. All your colleagues have been having 90 minutes.
I think I thank you, Speaker, for that magnanimity, and probably say it's because of the docket that I serve, because it's so critical to the country. I want to ask you and persuade you that in your wisdom, Mr. Speaker, that this country requires all of us. The arms of government must work together, must work in tandem, and I am willing and ready to submit to the authority of this House in making sure that the legislation that we propose, the ideas that you come with, will go a long way in improving food productivity, in making Kenya food secure. If I find favor in your wisdom and approve me as the nominee for to take the position of CS Agriculture. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Franklin Mithika Linturi. I'll now, before releasing you, advise you to engage with the clerk's office. They need some documentation from you before you leave the precincts of this county hall. Sergeant, you may show the honorable nominee the way out.
Franklin Mithika Linturi akiondoka hapo kikaangoni amechukua takriban saa 2:30 kujieleza mbele ya kamati ufaafu wake na uwezo wake wa kuhudumu katika wizara ya